I'm Mark Golub, and in election 2016, the drama becomes more bizarre by the day, and the FBI has upped the ante. In a press conference that took the media by surprise, a most rare occurrence, FBI Director James Comey announced that his bureau would recommend to Attorney General Loretta Lynch that no charges be brought against Hillary Clinton for her misuse of emails and her server, despite the fact that Director Comey spent nearly 15 minutes outlining what he called Mrs. Clinton's extreme carelessness in her mishandling of top secret emails on a series of unsecured servers. During Mr. Comey's scathing criticism of Secretary Clinton's extreme carelessness, and of his making it clear that Mrs. Clinton had misled the American people during her public insistence that she'd never knowingly received or transmitted an email marked top secret at the time, and that she had handed over to the Justice Department all of the emails in question. It seemed to virtually everyone that the Director Comey's conclusion would have to be a recommendation that the case be taken to a grand jury. And since Secretary Lynch had already said, in the aftermath of her bizarre private meeting with President Clinton on an Arizona tarmac, that she would accept the FBI's recommendation, it suddenly looked like the country would be thrown into chilling chaos, as one of the two presumptive presidential nominees would be facing a criminal grand jury. And then, just as suddenly, Director Comey took a hard left turn and announced that despite all of the errors in Mrs. Clinton's handling or mishandling of her emails, while it might be appropriate for her to be subject to administrative sanctions, were she still part of the State Department, the FBI would be recommending to the Justice Department that based on prior precedent, there was not enough evidence of either seditious intent or of gross negligence to warrant any criminal action to be taken against Mrs. Clinton. And suddenly, after months of speculation, it was over, and the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee was formally free of any criminal prosecution. Of course, this does not mean the public debate is over. Immediately, partisan voices assembled in their respective corners, ready for the next round. It's been a major anomaly in this election cycle that both candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have the lowest trust ratings in the history of presidential elections. Neither candidate is trusted by a majority of Americans. And more and more Americans are saying simply, they will not vote at all in this presidential election for a presidential candidate. So what's the response of the American Jewish community in the wake of this soap opera type twists and turns that we've seen in this election season? For some perspective, we're joined once again on our JBS phones from our nation's capital by the outstanding Washington correspondent of the Jewish Forward, Nathan Gutman. Nathan, it's good to have you back with us again.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
Nathan, you wrote a piece recently about the Jewish community's feelings about Hillary Clinton. This was before the FBI just came out with what MSNBC calls a scathing and excoriating criticism of her excessive mishandling of top secret emails. First, I want you to summarize for the JBS audience what you were seeing before this week's surprise press conference, and then I want you to talk about the impact the FBI findings are likely to have on the Jewish community's attitude toward this race.
I think Hillary Clinton went into this race with a huge advantage in terms of in dealing with the Jewish community. And it doesn't have to do only with ideology or with the mere fact that, in general, any Democratic candidate comes into a presidential race with a huge advantage just
Exactly.
because of the tendency of Jewish Americans to vote Democrat.
Yes.
And that hasn't changed much in recent years. But Hillary Clinton had an added advantage here, and that is the fact that she's been around for a long time, and she had very close ties with the Jewish community as First Lady, even dating back as First Lady of Arkansas, but mainly in the White House, and then Senator from New York. It's very hard to get elected and to be a senator from New York without maintaining a working relationship with the Jewish community, whether it's on major policy issues, foreign policy issues, Israel and stuff like that, or even on local issues that constituents care about. You're, after all, representing the state with the largest Jewish population in the country. So she came into this race with a very extensive network of contacts and ties with the Jewish community. And even though I'm not sure that the deep sentiment of Jewish Americans is warmer towards Clinton than of the general population, clearly she does have the ties, she has the contacts, and she's highly appreciated in the Jewish community. So definitely she entered this race with a clear advantage. Not to mention the fact that she's running against Donald Trump, who has his own issues with the Jewish community. So all this was even before the recent report by the FBI. Will the Jewish community, will Jewish voters care about Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information in the emails? I think, in a sense, it will play into the trust issue and into the feeling that some may have that Hillary Clinton feels at times, that Hillary and Bill Clinton feel at times that they're above the law, above the regulations, that they can do whatever they want. But in general, that didn't seem to be the issue on the minds of Jewish voters this week, who were still occupied with this whole Star of David tweet by Donald Trump. And in a sense, even now, when you try to weigh these two issues in terms of the way Jewish Americans, in my view, are looking at these elections, they're more concerned about these hints and subtones of anti-Semitism in Trump's campaign than questions about Hillary Clinton's in dealing with classified information.
Very interesting. You're saying that in the Jewish community, what you have experienced is there are serious numbers of American Jews who feel that Donald Trump is anti-Semitic.
Well, that's taking it exactly one step further than I think most people will tell you. I don't think people feel that Donald Trump is anti-Semitic. I think most people, if you'll ask them, they'll say Donald Trump is not anti-Semitic, and not only because what he keeps on saying. Well, he has a Jewish son-in-law, and his daughter converted to Judaism, and he has Jewish grandchildren. Not because of that, just because of the fact that no one really suspects Donald Trump of espousing anti-Semitic views. The question is his campaign, are the people surrounding him more hospitable to others, to fringe elements that are anti-Semitic? And that goes back to that tweet that we mentioned, this ad showing Hillary Clinton in the background, piles and piles of dollar bills, and the question of whether Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt candidate appears in this shape of a Star of David. Now, clearly that was probably not meant by Trump to be anti-Semitic, but someone picked it up from another website that also was hospitable to white supremacists and to anti-Semites. So the feeling is that even though no one would come out and say we feel that Donald Trump is anti-Semitic, the feeling is that he's not doing enough to uproot these anti-Semitic fringes that are trying to tag on to his campaign.
Okay. By the way, that is a fair distinction. I hope people understand the nuance that you're trying to help us see. I agree with you. I don't think Donald Trump is anti-Semitic. I don't think that it would have been stupid beyond stupid for him to try, or anybody in his campaign, to try to use a subtle anti-Semitic message at this point in time. It is just, it is, I'm incredulous of anybody saying that there was anti-Semitism behind it. What I do think is true is that the people who are working with Donald Trump are really novices here, Jonathan, and they don't think through enough the optics or the message that the optics convey, and they therefore they open themselves up to a media which just grabs onto these charges in a most vicious way. And I'm watching American television, and virtually every channel I've got some commentator criticizing Donald Trump and his staff for doing something that was anti-Semitic. And I think your description is not only more nuanced, it's much more accurate and fair. My problem with Donald Trump has much less to do with the typical ad hominem comments one hears on American television or one reads in editorials. And I think I've said this to you before. My problem with Donald Trump is that when I speak to American Jews, and that's who I'm most interested in, especially as we discuss this on JBS, is that you hear two overriding criticisms which seem valid to me. The two valid criticisms are, he has virtually no experience whatsoever in the halls of government, and he does not seem to have the temperament necessary to be president of the United States. And those two things, for many American Jews I speak to, Jonathan, disqualify him from being a legitimate presidential candidate. And at the same time, Jonathan, I'm talking to American Jews all the time. Traditional democratic voting American Jews. They voted Democrat their whole life. And they are very upset with Hillary Clinton. They do not have, in my experience, the kind of overwhelming positive response to her. And what I often hear is, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton if there was any alternative, but you can't vote for Donald Trump, and therefore I will do one of two things. I'll either vote for Hillary while holding my nose, or I will vote for no one. That's been the feedback I continue to get all the time. I want to hear again, we've discussed this type of question before. Of late, what are you hearing and what are you experiencing from the average folk, the Jewish folk, when it comes to this election?
Well, I'm not sure that anyone can actually gauge exactly what the average Jewish folk thinks, or for that matter, the average Jewish American in general. But a few points to the issues you're raising. First of all, clearly, you spoke about the fact that Trump's campaign, his headquarters is made up of novices in the political arena. And that is true, and that explains to a great extent a lot of the things that we're seeing in his campaign. Although it's hard to understand why someone who's been running for president for a while, who's interested in it, who clearly has the money to set up a real campaign operation, can't really hire staff and build a campaign operation that will answer these problems. And one of the things I've been hearing, and I don't think it's from Jewish folk, as you say, but more from Jewish professionals, is this fact that why doesn't Donald Trump have a liaison to the Jewish community? That's pretty much par for the course. It's something that every presidential campaign has. It's that someone there who knows how to speak to Jewish donors, who knows how to speak to Jewish community leaders, who knows how to organize events. And frankly, that's exactly the kind of person who in the headquarters would just take a glance at that ad or that tweet with a Star of David and would set off the alarm bells, because for any Jewish eye, this would seem offensive, even if people at the campaign headquarters don't notice it. So it's these miscalculations that also get Trump in trouble and are very difficult for Jewish voters to understand and to accept. Regarding the sentiment towards Hillary Clinton, clearly there are parts of the Jewish community that don't like Hillary Clinton. They don't like her policies. They don't like the fact that they see her as someone who will continue President Obama's policies on Israel, which they disagreed with. And they probably don't like the way she acted as Secretary of State or as Senator. However, if we're looking at the Jewish electorate as a whole, these voices are coming mainly from the Orthodox community. And the Orthodox community, while powerful and while growing in numbers, is still relatively small within the broader Jewish community. We talk about 10, 11, maybe even 12% of Jewish Americans. And we're talking about a community that, to a large extent, is concentrated in New York, a blue state that will not flip even if all the Orthodox Jews vote against Hillary Clinton. So the power, the political power of those who dislike Hillary Clinton is much less significant than in those Jewish Americans who actually support her.
I think you're absolutely right, with one caveat. My own experience has been, and you know, Nathan, at some point you and I will be able to do a retrospective. You know, after the election in November, it'll be interesting to see how much of what you and I both thought, where we agreed and disagreed, wherever that is, how much of what we had thought turns out to be true. I want to say to you again, Nathan, my experience is that it's not simply Orthodox Jews who are very, very disillusioned with and disappointed with Hillary Clinton. It is Jews across the spectrum, from secular Jews through conservative Judaism. Reform Jews, by the way, tend to be very, very pro-Democrat. I'm talking to Reform Jews also, who say to me, you know, Barack Obama disappointed me. I voted for him twice. I'd vote for him again. I'm going to vote for Hillary, but I'm not happy about it. I am not suggesting American Jews are going to vote Republican, but I am struck by the extent to which they are not enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton. And one more thing, many people have expected Hillary just to pull away from Donald Trump, and that the election will become a landslide victory for her in November. Then, in a recent major USA poll, the race seems to be tightening up, and surprisingly, Mrs. Clinton now leads Donald Trump by only 5 percentage points, 45% to 40%. Now, it's still early, but are you finding this reflected also in the Jewish community, that the race will ultimately evolve, as races always do, into a much tighter race? And again, whether the Jewish community, which is so insignificant, very good point by you, it's so insignificant, and very often it's in industrial states that are going to go Democrat, as you say, even if every single Jew voted against the Democratic candidate, which won't happen. But are you finding in any sense the way that the race is closer than anybody expected to be reflected in the Jewish community or in Jewish leadership that you speak with?
Not necessarily now. Again, we don't have any polls, and it's practically impossible to poll the Jewish community politically during an election time. It will take the resources that you'd need for that are really unreachable. So we don't have scientific data. But basically, when you talk about the Jewish vote, and again, we need to ignore huge swaths of the American Jewish population that live in New York and in California and in Illinois, because these states are not in place. So basically, we're left with the Jewish community of Florida, with the Jewish community of Cleveland, and to a certain extent with the Jewish community of Pennsylvania, 3 major swing states that do have a sizable Jewish community. We saw recent reports as late as today indicating, again, anecdotally, that there is dissatisfaction among Jewish voters with Donald Trump because of these accusations, of these hints of anti-Semitism. And that is something that Donald Trump will have to address in a more serious way than just saying, well, my son-in-law is Jewish. Or my daughter is Jewish, and if he does that, he may be in a more competitive position in these states, especially in Florida, that has been known to have more of a conservative Jewish population, and did play a role for the past 10, 20 years in determining the state's outcome. But beyond that, I really don't see any indication that the Jewish community is wavering in its support for Hillary Clinton. And I think it is interesting because for many Jewish Republicans, this year, 2016, was supposed to be their year. After coming off a lot of disappointment with the Obama presidency, they really felt that this would be their opportunity to break across the 20-30% barrier and to really make their mark in the general elections. And then came Donald Trump, and to a certain extent slashed these hopes. So even Jewish Republicans understand to a certain extent that 2016 probably won't be their year.
Yes, again, very, very well said. What do you make of the fact that both candidates have such terribly low trust numbers? USA reports that Hillary has 53% of people saying that they don't trust her, and Donald Trump has 60% of people saying they don't trust him. What's that all about?
Well, these are amazing numbers. It's basically what these numbers are telling us is that come November, the American people will elect a president, regardless who they choose. They will elect a president that they don't trust.
Yes.
And that's amazing. Of course, these numbers didn't come out of thin air. Hillary Clinton has been struggling with an image problem for years. She is seen as powerful. She is seen as competent, but she never got high numbers in terms of trustworthiness because it goes back to the early Clinton years. She is seen as an inside political player, as being part of the ruling elite in the Democratic Party. And again, as someone who bends the rules or believes that the rules are made for other people, not necessarily for the Clintons. Whether this is right or wrong, it's a different discussion, but that's the perception, and that's something she's been struggling with. And of course, once you have a Republican rival that is amplifying these complaints, so more and more people buy into that. Trump, on the other hand, is a very colorful, a very powerful individual, but he came, for most voters, he came out of nowhere in terms of politics. They knew him as an entertainer, they knew him as a businessman, but not as a politician. So to start with, they had trust issues with him. And of course, the fact that he flip-flopped on his views, that he didn't seem to have a coherent policy on any issue, and just his brash style, of course, that turned off people, that led people to feel that they cannot trust him as an individual. On the other hand, there are those who actually believe that because of this style, he's more trustworthy than most of his rivals because he says it as it is.
Yes.
And that does work with a certain part of the population, but clearly not with most voters.
Uh-huh. My understanding from your perspective is that despite the very harsh criticism that came from Director Comey of Hillary Clinton, where he basically said she lied about the fact that she never received or transmitted documents that were at the time deemed classified. And he goes on to, again, describe the extreme way she was irresponsible, and at one point he says anybody in a position should have known better. All those who worked with her should have known better. It's probable, although they can't prove it, that she was so irresponsible that she used her email when she was in territories of hostile nations, and that it's probable that she was hacked. Despite all that, it doesn't seem to, in your mind, move the needle on how American Jews will ultimately support her in the presidential election.
I don't think so. And the reason is, again, the reason isn't so much Hillary Clinton, the reason is Donald Trump. Especially also when you think of Jewish Americans, it's one of the voting populations that cares more than others about issues of foreign policy, national security. And these are issues also, again, where Hillary Clinton is coming into the race with a clear advantage over Trump, just because of the fact that she has experience, that she comes from within the system, that people can imagine her as commander in chief, whereas they find it difficult to imagine Donald Trump, who has zero experience on these issues. And for voters who care more about these issues than your average voter, definitely this is something that it plays a role. So again, had Hillary Clinton been running against any other Republican candidate, my answer would probably be different. But once
Very interesting.
against Donald Trump, it's very hard to shake Jewish voters on this
Yes.
issue.
In essence, what you're saying is that in some way, Hillary Clinton has benefited from the fact that she's running against Donald Trump.
For sure, for sure. On several issues, that is clear. And again, these are issues that Jewish voters care about.
Yes. All right, so just for fun, Nathan, do you want to guess at all whom Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton is going to pick as a VP running mate?
That's tough, especially with the Trump side.
Yes.
I'd say Trump's safe bet would be Newt Gingrich. Again, not someone who'd add much to the campaign, but he can give Donald Trump this respectability, these policy credentials that he's kind of missing. And not to mention, if we're talking really about Jewish voters, that Newt Gingrich is very close to the person who's supposed to be Trump's largest donor, Sheldon Adelson. So that could be a good pick for Donald Trump. But again, Donald Trump made a career of surprising people, so maybe he'll surprise us with this as well. As for Hillary Clinton, with all the talk about Elizabeth Warren and with all this electricity in the air that we've seen in their joint appearance yesterday, and with all the excitement that Elizabeth Warren could add to the campaign, my guess is that Hillary Clinton, being Hillary Clinton, will go with a safer bet, and someone like Tim Kaine, who could add some moderate centrist voice, who could win over the state of Virginia. That would be probably a safer bet for her, and she usually goes with the safe bets. So, but of course, all these guesses could be wrong. We could sit here a week from now and just make fun of these guesses.
Okay. And I look forward to doing that with you, Nathan. Nathan, are you having fun with all this? I mean, this presidential election has been unlike any other that I can remember. Is it fun for you?
Oh, definitely. It's really, elections are always fun and politics is always fun, but this is more than anyone could hope for. This is the election cycle that it would be hard to top this one.
Nathan, I told you you've become a fan favorite here on JBS. People really look forward to your comments very, very much. I'm so appreciative you always give me time and fit me into a very busy schedule. And again, you and I will continue to watch this election and speak often. But I thank you very much, my friend. You be well.
Thank you. It's good talking to you, Mark.
Thank you. Nathan Gutman, Washington correspondent of the Jewish Forward. I think he says it so well. It is true. It seems that the best thing that ever happened to Hillary Clinton, especially when you see where the FBI has gone, is that she's running against Donald Trump. And I'll say this again, more and more Jews whom I speak with, their attitude is, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton, or I'm voting for no one. I'm sitting out this election. I'd love to have any of you be in touch with me with where you stand and what you expect to do now come this upcoming November. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, editor, Dennis Golan, JBS's associate director, Dara Golub, and to the producer of Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.